pass my trials. Doors are closed, waiting for this god pharaoh. Show your face, let's feel your grace. Let's see what comes out of these gates. Razaketh, when he bled, made the Luxor River red. Looks like soon we'll all be dead unless the gatewatch saves the day. Second son, won't you come and let me win the game? Second son, won't you come? Won't you come? Ammon Cat.
Shout out to our patron of the week, Steven Erickson.
Wait, did you just record those, or
Yes, that was the intention of that.
I see. It just sounded like I was listening to a podcast. Which,
Well, that's the idea.
I know. It's weird to hear Nate record it live.
That's how it works.
I know it is.
Use your radio voice.
I need to work on that.
Your radio voice goes through your nose.
My radio voice probably sounds something like, the 20s, what was it, the transatlantic, hey folks, how you doing, or whatever.
Extra.
Read all about it.
Yeah, that kind of thing.
Commander time. They're trying to break into the podcast arena. I ran out of gas right there.
You tried, Patrick. You tried real hard. It was good.
It's Commander Time. Welcome to Commander Time. We are yet another podcast about the Magic the Gathering format known as Commander. You may have heard of us before. We're the ones who were in the previous 3 episodes of Commander Time. I'm Nate Burgess.
I'm Dean Goody.
And I'm Patrick Sapola.
Today, we are discussing how to break Brain in a Jar. Then, we might talk about some games we played, we'll tell you what our pets have been doing, and then maybe you'll hear a goofy song. But first, there is no but first. We're just going to go into it. The main topic. This series was inspired by a question Dean asked in our first episode about Patrick's playtesting process for building combo decks.
Have you tried shortcutting that before, Patrick? By just having like a practice game where you your opening hand has some of the pieces or all the pieces that you need to do the thing that you want to do? Or is that too fast? Like, does that one on the spot?
It's interesting because it comes down to, I think at this point in time, that might be good to do if you're really looking to cut down on the amount of time you're looking to go. Like if we had like a tournament we had to go to, if there was like a pro tour of Commander, I might be looking to do that.
Maybe someday.
Yeah.
All right.
In the Break That Card series, we look for a card that we like, which doesn't see as much play as we think it should. Then we build decks around that card as if it were a secret commander. We playtest the decks and compare notes. To make the card more accessible in the playtest, we put it in the command zone and treat it like a partner with its own command tax counter. Afterward, if we think the deck is a feasible build for EDH, we can cut the cards we did not like in the testing and replace them with the appropriate tutors to get our secret card out. So that way we don't have to convince people to let us put Brain in a Jar in the command zone.
It's not even legendary. You can't even just... Oh man, can you imagine legendary lands as a commander?
I mean, don't people already do that with Genji with the Realm, sort of?
Yeah, I'm just thinking of like Flagstones of
Trickhair.
Whatever it's called. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be something.
You'll always have that land drop.
My commander is Bow of Nylea. Wait a minute. So, this episode's card is Brain in a Jar. It's a rare from Shadows over Innistrad.
Yeah, it is.
Brain in a Jar is a 2-mana artifact. It has 1 generic, tap, put a charge counter on Brain in a Jar. Then you may cast an instant or sorcery card with converted mana cost equal to the number of charge counters on Brain in a Jar from your hand without paying its mana cost. It also has 3 generic, and tap, remove X charge counters from Brain in a Jar, scry X.
That second ability was actually a lot more useful than I expected it to be. Not just for the counter removal, but being able to scry X sort of every few turns.
Yeah, I mean, we can go into it later. I think we should probably break down where it is played currently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. On EDH Rec right now, we're looking at 148,000 total decks. And Brain in a Jar is played in 478 of them. That's not that many.
Mm-mm.
It's mostly in Melek, Izzet Paragon, Mizzix of the Ismagnus. Both of them like to have instants and sorceries. Shuyun the Silent Tempest, Noyandar Royal Shaper, Yeleva Nephalia Scourge, Jorian Ruin Diver. And now we're getting into less than 15 total decks. Malik and Mizzix, they only have 36 and 35 out of over 700 decks and 1,100 decks. So,
Yeah.
I think this is underplayed.
Yeah, I think it's probably underplayed after playing with it, but not by a ton.
It is relatively new.
It is relatively new. It used to be way more broken before the fuse card rules change that happened.
Mm-hmm.
But now it's way more fair. And you have to dump a lot of mana into it to make it do a lot of work. So it's kind of a iffy.
The biggest problem with it is that you can only cast that spell if it has the exact converted mana cost of the number of counters on Brain in a Jar. If it was equal to or less than, it would be much better.
Yeah.
Yeah, or if you could cast a creature with it as well.
Well, sure, but it's like it's supposed to be like the spell version of Aether Vial?
Yeah, but Aether Vial is way better.
Well, yes, but
I mean, but nothing. You can do an instant speed creature, and it's 1 mana, and you don't have to pay any more mana into it.
Yeah, that's true. But this is an instant speed sorcery. Come on, that's so good, right?
Sometimes.
Yeah. It's a little bit more chancy, I guess.
What set was Aether Vial?
Mirrodin.
Original Mirrodin, yeah. We stopped before getting to commanders that had 15 or fewer decks with Brain in a Jar in them. But if you scroll down here, it looks like we've got Vial Smasher at 8. And you run Vial Smasher. Do you run Brain in a Jar in your Vial Smasher deck?
I'm thinking about adding it.
You thought it performed well last night?
Well, I'll get to that
Okay.
later.
Fair.
I mean, it seems pretty good in Rashmi, actually, since you're always hurting for triggers on other people's turns. It allows you to skew more sorceries into your deck.
Right.
Yeah, it's true.
So some references on the YouTubes. There's a link right there. MTG Goldfish, the Saffron Olive. He talked about a standard format deck in April 2016 that was a mono blue. Brains in a Jar. It had a lot of card draw, and it had Rise from the Tides to make a bunch of zombies out of those card draw cards.
That's interesting. If you're playing in standard, you could actually have multiple brains out at a time, since it's not legendary.
Mm-hmm.
And intentionally stagger the counts of the counters on them.
That was one of my strategies for my deck, but I didn't get to pull it off yet.
How are you planning on executing that?
Oh, with Mechanized Production could do it. Blatant Thievery, I could steal all your brains in a jars. I got Clever Impersonator and Phyrexian Metamorph to become copies of Brain in a Jar.
Okay, that makes sense.
And I think there might have been something else.
Maybe Sculpting Steel.
Sculpting Steel, yes. That too.
Yeah, that makes sense. It makes a lot of sense.
So that way I have more variety and different levels of counters to work with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's not something that I considered when I was building my deck, trying to get extra copies of the brain.
That was definitely something I was struggling with as the games went on, is just knowing which charge counter to have it set on. I eventually just decided on trying to just tick it up really high so I could end up casting some of my win conditions, but I never actually got to that point.
A feature comparison. We've mentioned Aether Vial. There are some similar, and maybe better, rare and mythic rare cards from Amonkhet.
Yeah, we've got Oracle's Vault, which is an artifact for 4 generic. You can pay 2 and tap it to exile the top card of your library. Until end of turn, you may play that card, and you put a brick counter on Oracle's Vault. And then it has the second ability, tap, exile the top card of your library. Until end of turn, you may play that card without paying its mana cost. Activate this ability only if there are 3 or more brick counters on Oracle's Vault. And the other card that we got from Amonkhet is As Foretold, which is an enchantment for 2 and blue. At the beginning of your upkeep, put a time counter on As Foretold. Once each turn, you may pay 0 rather than pay the mana cost for a spell you cast with converted mana cost X or less, where X is the number of time counters on As Foretold.
Once each turn, not once each of your turns.
Yeah.
That's once every turn.
Yeah, that makes it real good.
Now, one note about that is Oracle's Vault and As Foretold do not change the timing restrictions on cards. So you cannot play a sorcery using either one of those on an opponent's turn unless you have something like Vidalcan Orrery, Leyline of Anticipation, Alchemist Refuge. There's another one.
Winding Candons.
You could be playing Quicken, or there's a dragon that lets you cast sorceries at instant speed from Return to Ravnica.
It's a red-blue?
It is red-blue.
The Flash Mirror, who gives artifacts flash.
Shimmer Mirror?
Yeah.
It's a Hypersonic Dragon.
Hypersonic Dragon. It's a 3 blue and a red, 4/4 flying and haste. You may cast sorcery spells as though they had flash. So the point is, if somebody's playing an Oracle's Vault or an As Foretold and they try to sneak in a sorcery on someone else's turn, maybe they can't do that.
Just go, nope. Nope.
Maybe not.
Yeah.
It's not really comparable, but these are all kind of variations on casting spells for free. But, we would be remiss to not mention Omniscience, a 10-mana spell that just lets you play your cards from your hand for free.
Yeah, it almost feels like cheating.
Once you get to that point, you don't need to discuss more of the strategy. You just play all your stuff.
These are cheaper versions of Omniscience at this point.
There is also the emblem you can get off of Tamayo, which one is it? It's the Bant Tamayo.
Field Researcher.
Yeah, Tamayo Field Researcher. Draw 3 cards, and then you get an emblem with basically Omniscience.
So some of the features of all these things. Mana fixing. The colors of your lands don't matter anymore because you're not having to match up the color pips in your spell CMCs.
No.
Yep, that's true. That actually came in handy for me when I was casting. What did I cast? I hit Dawn with a Render Silent one turn, and I didn't have to worry about whether it was blue or white. I just popped it out with the Brain in a Jar.
Yeah, I got a Dune Blast out. Somebody played a Cryptic Command.
Yep. Yeah, that was Dawn's Cryptic Command.
And he added a Brain in a Jar, but he didn't really use it.
Yeah, did you cast that Dune Blast at instant speed?
I did.
Yeah. Go Brain in a Jar.
Go Brain in a Jar. So these 3 examples, Brain in a Jar, Oracle's Vault, and As Foretold, you're all putting counters on things that aren't creatures. And that's something I took advantage of with my deck. Brain in the Jar, it adds the counter right before you cast. So look at the mana cost of the card you want to cast and subtract 1, and that's how many counters it should have before you tap it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you use Brain in a Jar, you can pay additional costs, like a kicker on a Rite of Replication, but you cannot pay alternate costs, like an Overload for your Vandal Blast.
True.
Yeah. And that's true for each of these cards, Oracle's Vault and As Foretold. You can pay those additional costs, but not the alternate costs.
Yeah. The trick to knowing the difference between an additional cost versus a alternate cost is read the text. If it says you may pay in addition to, that's an additional cost. And if it's you may cast instead, that's a different casting cost. So It's one of those things that like a lot of newbies will try to make more confusing than it actually is.
Yeah, actually, speaking of additional or alternate costs, do you want to explain how split cards work with Brain in a Jar, Patrick?
Sure. Before the rules change, it was a lot more confusing, but right now, the way to explain it is if you are looking for the converted mana cost of any split cards, it is now currently the total number of both sides of the split card. So if you're running fire and ice in a deck, it's 2 for fire, 2 for ice. So the total is going to be 4 for a card in your hand. The only time now that it's ever going to have 2 is if it's on the stack. So if I ever get into a situation where I am casting just fire, I can get spell snared. But if I were to cast fire and ice, that now has a converted mana cost of 4, can't get spell snared.
All right, and then that works in a similar way with the new Aftermath cards, sort of, right? Because the Aftermath cards also contribute to the total converted mana cost of the card, but additionally, you can only cast the Aftermath half from your graveyard, regardless of cards like As Foretold or Brain in a Jar.
Right. This new rules does not change the type of card that either side can be cast. So, we have Commit to Memory. It's now quite a cool combo with Torrential Gear Hulk. In Standard right now, you have Commit to Memory in your graveyard. Commit is an instant, Memory is a sorcery, so it is both an instant and a sorcery, allowing Torrential Gear Hulk to target it in the graveyard, but because you're casting it from your graveyard for free, you can cast Memory for free instead of Commit.
That's interesting. And it works in EDH, too.
It does.
Woohoo!
Any other funky cost stuff that we should explain at this point?
I think that covers it.
Yeah.
I think so.
All right, so in our playtesting, here's some types of cards that we cast a lot.
Ugh.
We all kind of had counterspells. So you had 3 decks with counterspells.
And then Don, who also had counterspells.
Yeah, we added Don Miner of EDH Rec to playtest with us against our 3 goofy Brain in a Jar situations. And he was playing a mono blue with a bunch of counterspells. So that was a 2.5-hour game because everybody was countering everything.
Because as it turns out, blue really likes free spells.
Yeah, it was pretty horrible.
And most of the time, Brain in a Jar likes to have spells that cost about 1 or 2 or 3.
Yeah. Getting any higher than that is asking a lot on Brain in the Jar without getting targeted, because once it gets up to like 3 or 4, you start thinking about, at 4, I could suddenly see Armageddon at instant speed, and that sounds terrible.
Oh my, I didn't even think about, well, that would have been really bad for my deck, but, ooh.
Yeah.
I think, Nate, you were the only one who was really trying to capitalize on a large number of counters on Brain in a Jar.
Yeah, I did. And I didn't have As Foretold and Oracle's Vault in my original build, but I've added them.
Oh, are you planning on playing this deck some more?
I think so. I'm going to try it out.
It's definitely a unique build for the commander.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, for my deck, I was definitely focused more around spells that probably hovered around 2, 1, 3, probably not too much higher than 4.
Mm-hmm.
I tried to make a real nice curve with mine. I had 2 spells at 7, I think it was, but most of mine hovered around 3, 2 or 3, yeah.
You have to pay more attention to your mana cost curve when you're building a Brain in the Jar deck.
Yeah, usually you worry about the curve of your creatures and not the curve of your instants and sorceries so much.
Or a combination thereof.
Right.
In addition to counter spells, there were some copying spells, like Reverberate. Did you have a Wild Ricochet in there, Patrick?
Yeah, I had Insidious Will in there.
Yeah, and that's both.
Yeah.
Both a counter spell and a copy spell, and Split Decision, too.
Yeah.
You used that wild, or that Insidious Will, too.
Yeah, I did.
Mm-hmm.
What did you redirected an opportunity, was it? Yeah.
Yep, and then I copied it.
That's right.
Drew my 8 cards for me. Thanks.
Welcome.
At least somebody got them.
One note about all our decks, we all played pretty much creatureless decks. We didn't have many creatures, none of us.
Yeah.
Dean, you had a few fogs?
I tried to build around sort of a turbo fog and control strategy. I did. I played Dawn Charm and Aetherize and a bunch of unusual ones that probably don't see a lot of play, like Angel Song. I think the only one that you guys really saw a lot of was Dawn Charm. I think that got cast in our pre-Dawn game and then also when we were playing with Dawn.
Mm-hmm. There's also a Zorius Charm in my deck.
Yep.
that I used against Nate.
Man.
Atraxa is a beater no matter what deck she's in.
But it's a creatureless Atraxa.
Well, Atraxa is still a creature.
Yeah. Since Brain in a Jar needs to tap to do its thing, I think we all had some kind of untappers in there.
Yeah, I played two creatures besides my commander, and they both untap stuff. I had Vizier of Tumbling Sands from Amonkhet and Fate Stitcher from, I think, Alara Block.
Yeah, I had Fate Stitcher and Paradox Engine in mine.
Yep, Paradox Engine, and I added the artifact route of Voltaic Key and Unwinding Clock.
Oh yeah, I also ran Unwinding Clock, and I also ran the artifact lands as some extra free combo potential with Unwinding Clock. At one point, Nate had 5 of my Vizier of Tumbling Sands.
Mm-hmm. I replicated that.
Yeah.
Because somebody got rid of the Consecrated Sphinx, so I couldn't replicate that instead.
I was doing us all a favor. Well, everybody else that wasn't you and Dom.
Yeah.
I built a Noyandar deck. It's sort of a standard Noyandar. So the idea was to cast a lot of spells, put a lot of counters on lands, and then sort of Voltron my way in with 1 or 2 lands that either flew because they were Fairy Conclave or were indestructible because they were Darksteel Citadel, something like that. And the idea was just to keep the board clear of anything that wasn't a land, but that didn't really work out for me so much. I was running things like Planar Cleansing and Tragic Arrogance, which blow up either all or most of the non-land permanents on the board. And then my idea for getting a lot of counters on the lands was to fog each turn people attack me and use those fogs to build up my counter stockpile on Darksteel Citadel and those lands.
If there's one thing I know about Dean is that he loves fogs.
I do love fogs. They're so much fun. Sort of. They're fun for me to cast.
Yeah. I was very confused by Darksteel Garrison, but then I realized what you were doing and thought it was pretty okay. I guess if you could have gotten it on your Fairy Conclave or something like that, it would have been really nice.
Yeah, and the fun thing about Darksteel Garrison, it's the only fortification that exists in all of Magic. The only so it's like an equipment for lands, and it gives the land indestructible, and whenever that land becomes tapped, it gives target creature +1/+1. So in Noyandar, when you suit up a land with it, it becomes indestructible, and whenever it attacks, it can give itself the +1/+1 bonus.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only fortify?
It's the only one with the keyword fortify.
Wow.
It is, yeah, fortification. No, not the keyword, the type. It's a type.
It's a artifact fortification. It costs 2. Fortified land is indestructible. And whenever fortified land becomes tapped, target creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Until end of turn, so it's not a counter.
Correct.
Fortify 3, so that's basically like an equip cost.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a rare from Future Sight.
So it has that cool Future Sight border on it.
And that cool Future Sight set symbol.
I don't think I've ever seen it played before.
It's probably not too good outside of Noyandar.
Yeah.
But, since it exists and it's not in an unset, it could conceivably come back, fortifications that is, in some future set. Unlikely though it might be.
Well, we just got Even Mind Sensor.
Well, yeah, but that's not a whole other mechanic. That's just a single card with an ability on it.
Yeah, but he was a Future Sight card, and now he's in Standard, so one day.
Well, sure. But that happens with a lot of cards. Planeswalkers were originally in Future Sight.
Maybe they'll show up with contraptions someday.
They will. Marrow has promised.
Yep, he's going to figure it out.
That before he retires, he'll figure it out, and we will have contraptions.
Whatever they are.
Whatever they are. So pick up those Steam Flogger bosses now.
And pick up any rigger you may find.
Which I think is just Steam Flogger boss, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Rigger Contraption Tribal.
Mm-hmm.
Commander 2017. All right, so my deck, it was an Atraxa creatureless deck, except for those 2 creatures that become copies of Brain in a Jar. And since Brain in a Jar puts counters on itself, I'm going to put another counter on it when I want to. I'm going to proliferate them. So in an Atraxa creatureless deck, things like Dune Blast, Mass Calcify, Hellfire, and Inundate, none of these hurt Atraxa's board state, but they do some damage to everybody else, unless she's stolen some of their creatures, and then it might do some damage to you. But otherwise, Dune Blast away. Tragic Arrogance would probably be pretty good in there too. I didn't have it. I didn't have Oracle's Vault or As Foretold then, but I've since added them since Atraxa's gonna put more counters on them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that As Foretold is really good in Atraxa.
Ooh.
Yeah. And since I was expecting to have more counters, I could skew my CMC curve a little bit higher.
Yeah, you could, and you did.
Yeah, I
You
did.
cast some really big spells.
I think my Rise of the Dark Realms got countered.
Yeah.
There was some confusion there. There was some stack going on.
Yeah, I tried to copy it,
with
but
yeah.
Don didn't like it.
Yeah, this game was almost entirely a spell war. It was... I don't know. I think, Patrick, you were the only one who was really running a creature-heavy deck, but not really like traditional creatures.
It was not creature heavy. If you look at the deck list, I think there's 3 or 4 total creatures. I ended up skewing to tokens, actually. So my deck was Shu Yun, the Silent Tempest, and I always want to see Jeskai Ascendancy go off when possible. And the best thing you can do with Jeskai Ascendancy is have a lot of creatures that can loot, so you can look for whatever you're looking for. And so I figured, hey, let's make some tokens that can loot. That way, if the board stalls, I can get Jeskai Ascendancy out. I can get my creatures to be really huge, and then I can swing in and kill. So that was kind of a secondary win condition for me. I also had the Shuyin kind of like, I'm going to hit you real hard with Double Strike and Prowess, which also was nice with Brain in the Jar because I could flash out some sorcery speed token creation or something like that, and pump Shu Yun before damage, and then get the Double Strike going. So that was really nice. Some of the key stars in that deck were Anointed Procession, Monastery Mentor, and I couldn't really figure out a way to bust open everything, so I assumed everybody else would, and just put in a lot of copy effects, just so I could either copy my own token creation or copy other people's spells.
I would say your tokens were sort of the driving force of the game.
Yeah, it was surprisingly effective. I did not realize I had quite the critical mass needed to go that wide. Once Anointed Procession came out, it was quite obvious that everything was just going my way for a while.
I don't think anyone really expects Shuyun to go wide, actually. I mean, we sat down and I figured you were going to be playing a Voltron-style Shuyun, as you would typically expect from that deck.
Yeah, I also had a tertiary win condition in Approach of the Second Sun. So if I couldn't get in through combat damage in any way, I just wanted to be able to cast that and then loot my way into a win. So
sure.
The big things that I forgot to, I just, for whatever reason, forgot to include in the deck were ways to draw more cards. I had 1 copy of Temple Bell, and I assumed that was going to be enough at some point, with a Jeskai Ascendancy. I also had no ways to find my Jeskai Ascendancy or any of these spells that I wanted in my deck.
You did steal and copy my opportunity.
Yeah, I did do that. And for 3 turns leading up to that, I was just really hoping anybody was going to play a draw spell so I could copy it. Because I needed more action in my hand. I was down to 2 or 3 cards, and there was just nothing I could do.
Didn't you try to copy and expropriate also?
Well, I used split decision on that one. And that gave us the option of either countering it or copying it. So I chose counter, and the table went counter across the board.
No. Nate was going to let you
copy
have
it.
the copy.
Yeah. I would let you copy it. I get my turns first.
But Nate got outvoted, so
yeah.
Nah, it just got counted instead.
Yeah, it was a classic choice of what is more fun versus the correct play. And in this instance, I went with the correct play.
Man.
I think Don voted against it just because he didn't want to have to deal with figuring out turns and...
He didn't want to
bets.
vote more with the 2 expropriates.
Yeah.
So, well, we've been talking about our last game anyway, so let's talk about our last game.
Okay.
Yeah.
Our last game. So, it was the 3 of us playing our blue-white control counterspell decks, and we were joined by Donald Miner of EDH Rec. He was playing his Tanawa, mono blue, counter and bounce
And
deck.
things. Phasing.
And-
Lots of phasing.
Yeah. Phasing, which was kind of goofy, but he was bouncing stuff. And he took 5 turns in a row at one point, I
Yeah, he
think.
did do that.
Or maybe it was 6 turns in a row. He cast a time stretch, then played a Diluvian Primordial to get the time stretch back, did it again, then had a Snapcaster Mage.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But it wasn't Diluvian Primordial because that cast from opponents' graveyards.
No, he mnemonic walled,
Yeah, that's what it was.
walled it
Okay.
into his hand.
Mnemonic Wall.
Yeah.
And then he bounced the wall and recast it.
I was long dead by the time he started taking all those turns.
Yeah, by that point, I had killed Patrick with a land, and then... Was it you, Nate? Did you kill me? No, it was Don. Don killed me with Tanawa off of his extra turns.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And you just had the most life because of Traxa.
You kept fogging my Atraxa.
Yes. Yep. But then he killed me because he had like 6 turns in a row, and you just had the most life because Atraxa has lifelink.
Mm-hmm.
So he took a little bit longer.
I was still alive after Don took all his turns, but I think he countered my Dune Blast, and that was it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I kept track for a little while. We actually tapped our brain in a jar and put a counter on it and didn't cast anything about half the time.
Yeah, that's bad. That's really not what you want from a card like this. You want to be getting that value every time you activate it.
Yeah, I think we may have all been a little mistaken on where it is great, actually. I think it's really great when you have a lot of proactive spells and not a lot of reactive spells. If I had to redo this, I might go with a green-white populate deck and really focus on the tokens so that I always have something to tap with Brain in a Jar. Because just leaving up 1 mana for a counterspell kind of isn't great most of the time. Even if you have like a secondary plan of trying to get up to like 4 counters or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that Nate's strategy was also pretty potentially effective, just proliferating those counters to cast those really, really large spells. But those are also a little bit more proactive than counter spells. They're not reactive. They're like, hey, I'm going to take as many extra turns as you will all vote to give me with this expropriate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm looking at the mana curves for our decks, and I think Dean, you paid the most attention to the mana curve, I think.
Yeah, I do try to keep it tight.
Yeah, you had the most 1-drops, which I think that skews the stats for how many times we were actually able to use Brain in a Jar, because Patrick and I didn't have as many 1-drops as we could have.
I didn't find the 1-drops especially helpful, actually, because I could just cast them. It wasn't really helpful to cast it through Brain in a Jar.
Well, it's helpful to Brain in a Jar just to get the counter on it.
Sure, and I mean, if it is a sorcery like Preordain or something like that, then you get it at instant speed. But very often I would have 2 or 3 counters, or even just 1 counter on Brain in a Jar, and a couple of 1-drops in hand, and I wouldn't be able to activate Brain in a Jar to get my Preordain, you know?
Right.
Yeah. For Shu Yun, at the very least, in the way I built them, the way I was using Brain in a Jar was to cast the big mana spell and then try to copy it, was really the goal. Because in order to get Shu Yun's ability to go to double strike, you also need to have the mana open to do that. So if you play a big mana spell and want to make it a bigger one, you need to, and you still want to give them double strike, you kind of need that extra mana to go through. So that's kind of where I was skewing with my spells, I think.
So you gotta keep 2 left over just
Yeah.
for Shu Yun.
Yep. And so anytime I knew I couldn't trigger it, I generally speaking just did not attack because I would otherwise really risk Shu Yun and have to wait for him to be able to attack again.
Yeah, he is the win condition for the most part.
Yep, he's the main win condition at the very least.
So you found it difficult to attack out with Shu Yun?
Yeah, probably the biggest problems were I didn't put in something like a Rogue's Passage. I did have I had 2 haste enablers with Swiftfoot Boots and Hammer of Perforos, but I just never drew into either of them, and I think I probably need to put more in there in order to really cement my position as a aggro deck in that case.
Yeah.
So you would add Rogue's Passage in your revision. Yeah.
For sure.
I also found it difficult to attack out. Once people had 1 or 2 creatures out, like Patrick, you would drop Shu Yun and then cast, I don't know, what is it? The
SRAM's Expertise.
Yeah, but no, what's the townsfolk?
Call the Townsfolk.
Yeah, 1 and white to make 2/1/1s. I couldn't attack through those tokens. I didn't have trample on my lands. And then Nate, you had Atrax out, who is just really good at blocking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Gather the Townsfolk.
Yeah, gather the townsfolk. I couldn't attack through those tokens with it didn't matter how big my land was if I couldn't get it through, a couple of tokens or a single Atraxa. I don't know, it was a little bit difficult. It was harder than I thought it would be.
Are there any creature lands with trample?
Yes. Not in white-blue, though.
No.
I did run a little bit of evasion with Fairy Conclave and the Blink Moth and Ink Moth Nexus and Celestial Colony. Those all have flying, but no trample.
Do you have to pay the equip cost each time? Does the equipment fall off of a creature land?
It depends on the creature, but in the case of Noyan Dar, when you put the counters on it, the land becomes a 0/0 always. So
okay.
It turns it into a man land forever.
Okay. In that case, I might recommend Haunted Cloak and Chariot of Victory.
Yeah, those are definitely things that I would include. Things like that. Or like Trailblazer's Boots would also have been very handy.
Yeah, because everybody's playing non-basics.
Yeah. What were your all-star cards in this deck, Nate? Did the deck work with Brain in a Jar, or did you not need the Brain in a Jar? Did it help your game plan or not?
I did need the Brain in a Jar to cast the spells I was casting. I did need that mana discount, and I did need to change my sorceries into instants.
If you built this deck according to regular commander rules, not using the Brain in a Jar as a partner commander, would you build some tutors to try to find it, or would you try to run the deck, just finding it by happy accident?
Oh, no, definitely. Yeah, I would take like the worst 5 or 10 cards, well, maybe 5, somewhere around there. Take the worst 5 cards that I didn't like in the playtesting and just replace them with tutors. Sure.
I think Fabricate would probably be the best tutor to put in here because if you've already got your Brain in a Jar, you could go find your Unwinding Clock or something.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Patrick?
I would probably end up running a couple tutors. Yeah, Fabricate would probably be good. I would probably also run Academy Rector, just because he'll get out either As Foretold or Jeskai Ascendancy or Anointed Procession, which I desperately wanted to see any 3 of those at any time, really.
All right, you got more layers in your combos.
Yeah, so I really want to kind of keep as open as possible with the tutors I would run. Yeah, the nice thing about Fabricate, though, is that I would also be able to get Swiftfoot Boots, so I could protect my general a little bit better and give haste.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I always put Swiftfoot Boots and Lightning Greaves in anything that I'm planning to win through commander damage.
For sure.
Or any commander that I don't want to die to get targeted. I want them to be hexproof or shrouded.
Yeah.
Let's see. What about you, Dean? Would you run more tutors in your deck?
So for the Noyan Dar deck that I built, I think I would probably not run extra tutors. I was envisioning getting all these free counterspells, or cheap counterspells rather, cheap counterspells or cheap fogs off of the Brain in a Jar each turn, but it ended up being difficult because the count would go up and the cards in my hand had a lower CMC, and then I would have to pay 3 and take the counters off. So I think I would either retool the deck and build with bigger spells, or just leave it in as like a happy happy accident kind of a draw.
Yeah. So I guess maybe we should talk about some deck comparisons.
Sure. So we all played blue and white.
Yeah.
All of us played As Foretold. We all played Brainstorm, Swan Song, and Swords to Plowshares. And there were a few lands that we all played as well. Was there anything that you guys saw that you didn't have? Some that you saw us play that you didn't have that you added? That you're planning to add?
After that Insidious Will trick that Patrick pulled, I think I would probably add that into my deck.
Let's see. I always forget that Cryptic Command is a card because I don't own one. I'd probably put that in my deck too. Just being able to tap down the entire board is really, really powerful.
That's how Don won, isn't it? He tapped everything down and then he took all of his extra turns.
Dawn!
And then Nate and I had Gilded Lotus, Insidious Will, Paradox Engine, Path to Exile, Spelltwine, and Swiftfoot Boots in common.
Any of those you would add, Dean? Paradox Engine, for sure. Come on.
Yeah, Paradox Engine would have been really awesome. I think Paradox Engine and Brain in a Jar almost just sort of combo off and win you. Well, not win you necessarily, but they definitely combo off.
I think Oracle's Vault probably does it better, but...
Probably.
But it's not a bad thing. I was mostly running it for double looting triggers for Jeskai and Ascendancy more than anything.
That Spelltwine would have been pretty sweet, given that we were all playing really spell-heavy decks also.
Mm-hmm.
That might have been a meta call on my part.
Well, it was definitely a smart meta call.
Then Nate and Dean, you had Ponder, Preordain, and Unwinding Clock.
Yeah, so any of those that you would throw in yours?
I actually had Ponder and Preordain in my initial one, but as I was refining the deck, I knew I didn't have a lot of time to spend looking at the top of my library for the most part. Instead of just looking at the top, what I really wanted to do was churn through it, if possible. So I kind of cut those in favor of Faithless Looting and its ilk.
Patrick, you had so much time. You had 2.5 hours to look at the top cards of your library.
Yeah, I know. Listen, I've already told you what I very clearly misbuilt, and I will still stand by my cutting of Ponder and Preordain. I just think I should have probably cut other things and added more filtering for the top deck.
I really liked your deck, actually. I still think that Open into Wonder would have been a really good card to add to your deck.
Oh, yeah, speaking of, I can't believe I didn't think of From the Tides. That would have been great in my deck.
Rise from the Tides?
Yeah, Rise from the Tides. That would have been great. 2/2 zombies for a whole bunch. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's the one that Saffron Olive built around, right?
Yep. I've watched that video. I liked it a lot. Totally forgot about it.
Oh, yeah. That would have been really good. What about the Unwinding Clock, though? Did you just overlook that?
I didn't have enough artifacts, I don't think, to really capitalize on it. So I was running a few rocks, and that's about it. I was running the rocks mostly just to make the Paradox Engine go forever.
Yeah, I was running 14 artifacts, which I think is enough for Unwinding Clock.
Yeah, I was not running nearly that many.
Yeah, that's why I included those artifact lands to increase my artifact count.
Sneaky.
Yeah.
They get hurt by Vandal Blast, though. You gotta watch out.
Yeah, that is, well, not Darksteel Citadel, but the other ones do. And then let's see. Patrick and I ran Azorius Signet, Counterspell, Disallow, Fate Stitcher, and Supreme Verdict. Any of those seem like they would be decent in your deck, Nate?
I would not run Azorius Signet in Atraxa. I might run Counterspell or Disallow if I wanted to go that way. Fate Stitcher I would not run. I run Turnabout instead because it's an instant or sorcery.
I was running Fate Stitcher because that's part of the modern Jeskai Ascendancy combo, because he allows you to tap down your opponent's stuff as well. It's the reason why I wasn't running any just straight untappers. I wanted the tap and untap ability. And the fact that if he ever dies, I can just unearth him for the big combo turn or something like that is really why he was in there.
All right. I think I already have enough one-sided board wipes that I don't need Supreme Verdict. But I do have Merciless Eviction.
That's a pretty good one. If I could have run that in my deck, I probably would have.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, you were the only one playing black and the only one playing green.
I like black sorceries. They're pretty cool.
Black is a great color.
And if they can be instant speed, then that's wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. I can make my Army of the Damned right on someone's end step.
And you tried to.
And then untap my zombies. Yeah, I tried.
Was that Don again?
Yeah, that was the same turn. It was Don.
Ugh, Don!
Yeah, I mean, I liked the play so much that I was trying to copy it with Anointed Procession out, so I was going to get 26 tapped zombies. But Don countered it and fizzled my copy.
Yeah, that's something that we learned in the game. Turns out, if you counter a spell that's being copied, you fizzle the copy spell.
Yep. This makes me sad.
Mm.
Actually, my first kind of go at building these decks is I kind of wanted to make a Yidris deck instead. To kind of get Cascade off of the big mana spells after I've made that swing in, which seemed to get some more free value. I ended up running the Expertises, the Barals and Saram instead, just to get some added prowess triggers and things like that instead. So yeah, that was kind of where I was coming from. I think that could actually still work in a Yidris deck. It seems kind of fun.
I have a pile of cards sitting around waiting to become a Yidris deck, and I think I have Brain in a Jar in that pile. I'm not sure I'll run it, though. I think it requires a little bit more work to build around. I think As Foretold would just be better in Yidris, at least for my build.
Yeah, it only gives it until end of turn 2, so you don't really benefit from the giving sorceries flash, or casting them at instant speed, rather.
Right, because it has, it just doesn't deal combat damage on your opponent's turns. Or at least not to your opponents.
Yeah.
So, was it fun?
At first. Up until about... the first hour and a half were real fun, and then the next hour was long.
I would say there were lots of exciting moments.
Mm-hmm. Do you think in a normal, regular meta that doesn't have 4 counterspell decks in the same game?
I think if any one of us were running these types of decks, it would have been a fun game. Yes.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. So you might potentially take your deck out to a different meta to try it out.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. What do you want to do for the next Break That card? Do you want to do Brain in the Jar again, or save that for later? You want to try Oracle's Vault?
Oracle's Vault, I think it's going to suffer the same kind of problems as Brain in a Jar, and it's still really...
Well, it's a little different, though, because you can cast a lot of different kinds of things with that vault.
You can also get a land off of the top. But I think it's still too new. We don't know if it's going to be underplayed at this point.
That's the point of Break That card, right?
Yeah, but...
Find out?
It's not underplayed yet. It's... How many people are running it now?
It has to be a card that we like, too.
Yeah.
If you don't like it, then we won't do it.
I mean, all 3 of us would be running Paradox Engine.
Yes, we would.
Sure.
And then at that point, it would be whoever gets their Paradox Engine just wins with the Oracle's Vault.
Yeah. Ooh, here's an idea. How about Primal Surge?
Break Primal Surge?
I've done that with Rurik Thar, the Unbowed, already.
Yeah, me too.
Okay.
Here's a question for you guys, actually, about Oracle's Vault. Would you run Mana Severance in a deck with Oracle's Vault?
Mana Severance.
Remove your land cards from the game?
Yeah, from your library.
Oh, yeah.
What happens if somebody blows up your Oracle's Vault?
It would have to be when you're comboing off with the Vault, and you would probably want to have a counterspell as protection.
So then counterspell is a contingent part of your combo.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, if they blow it up in response and you can't protect it, you could always just fail to find those lands and leave them in there.
Yeah. In a super spike meta, yes, I would do it. But I'm not in that meta, so I probably wouldn't run it.
Well, think about it. think about what card you want, and we'll find out.
Yeah.
And we can always take in suggestions as well for breaking a card.
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea.
Oh, yeah. So tweet your suggestions to @commandtime. Break that card.
#break.
So anything else on Brain in a Jar?
It was a fun thought experiment. I still am not convinced it's, I don't know, I'm not convinced that any of us broke it since none of us won.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point there.
Yeah, I was hoping to get Approach of the Second Sun off of it so I could really live the dream, but it just never really worked out.
I am interested to hear from anybody who's listening, though. Have you broken Brain in a Jar? What's the most busted play you got off of it?
Yes.
Show us what you got.
Show me what you got.
We like what you got.
All right.
How about some pets?
Yeah.
The Pets Update.
What about your pets?
So, I don't really know many cats that enjoy belly rubs.
Yeah, they usually show their bellies to attack your hand.
Yeah, it's like, put your hand here so I can get all my limbs pointy and grab your hand and see what my back legs can do. But one of my cats actively enjoys and solicits belly rubs.
That's really interesting. Is it very soft, Nate?
It is. She's got kind of medium long hair.
I've seen that with 2 cats, I think, in my whole life. My cat growing up, and then my friends have a Maine Coon, which is about the size of a medium dog, and that cat is super floppy and loves all kinds of attention.
Yeah, she's floppy, all right.
It's the best kind of cat.
My dog is playing with his daycare friend again. He's finally caught her heart, and they're running around together and having fun. We're very excited. He's now twice as exhausted as he usually is.
Oh, that is nice. Our dog is high energy.
Ours is very low energy. It doesn't take it much to make him want to sleep.
Our dog is part Chihuahua, so she's she's always going. She's constantly wound up. And recently more so, a bunch of Rochester is sort of a college town, so the school year just ended and a bunch of students have left the area and new people have moved into their apartments and stuff around us. So there's lots of new dogs in the neighborhood, and that means lots of new barking to be done at the dogs. Like, hey, I was here first.
This is my place. This is my place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mine.
It's like the seagulls from Finding Nemo.
Mine.
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 Yes.
I don't think I've ever actually seen that.
Have you not? Oh my.
I don't have children, Dean.
I watched it well before I had kids.
I don't watch...
You wait, don't you teach, like, what, your preschool children or something?
Kindergartners.
You have less excuse... Yeah, you have less excuse than I do.
I don't own Finding Nemo?
You own that Nemo. You own it.
Well,
that's our episode.
Yeah, on the next Commander Time.
Next time, Dean will talk about his Commander games at GP Richmond, and I will talk about Commander games at GP Vegas. What do we talk about after that, guys?
What was our second episode on?
Green Hate.
Yes, Green Hate.
Green Hate.
Yeah. I wouldn't mind doing another hate episode. That would be fun.
All right.
Yeah.
What do you want to hate?
Spell hate, maybe. Or should it be color
Spell
specific?
hate.
Yeah. Hating on instants and sorceries.
That'll be a nice follow-up to this one.
Yeah, I think so.
All right, so the next Evolve Your Meta will be Anti-Instants and Sorceries. Get out, spell slingers. Be gone.
We're creature people over here in Commander Time land.
And also possibly artifacts and enchantment people, too.
Yeah, speak for yourself, buddy. Visit us at patreon.com/commandertime.
You can find me on Twitter at Grubfellow.
At Detective Yarmits.
At Mr. Plorg.